Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 32 of the PowettPlay Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Shannon, as always. I'm joined by my co-host, Kieran Powell, and we have a special guest today in Bharat Sundaresan. Lovely to meet you, Bharat, and thank you for joining us on the PowettPlay Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's strange being in the Caribbean when Kieran's not here, like he's in another country. So I officially call myself the king of the Caribbean because it's his fault. It's his fault. Like, he left the seat vacant and all I did was came and occupied it.
Yeah, no, fair enough, yeah. Well, obviously, I'll get started. I just wanted to ask you, obviously, about your life in cricket and where did it all start?
Look, I think it's a more standard start, I would say. Like I was born and brought up in Mumbai, which was still Bombay back then, which is why I still refer to it as Bombay. And like any other Indian kid, I was born in the mid 80s. As I was growing up, the whole Sachin Tendulkar, the era began when I was 4 years old. And I guess cricket is, I'm not a big fan of the whole myth of cricket being a religion in India because, and honestly, the reason for that being I come from a country, originally my motherland, if you want to call it that, where religion divides people, cricket actually brings everyone together. But it is sort of part of our DNA. We just, and doesn't mean that everybody's into cricket, but most of us just naturally get prone towards cricket. And especially if you grow up in a household where you have an elder brother and a father who are obsessed with cricket, it just like played a very significant part in my life. However, the big difference though was my father and my brother were obsessed with Indian cricket. And I don't know for what reason, from the day I remember watching cricket, I just became a West Indies fan. And I'm not one of those bandwagon jumpers because, my first cricket match would have been 89-90. So I pretty much became a West Indies fan when the downfall was starting. So you can't blame the downfall on me because that's pretty much my timeline as well. It's just, you can cut the really long story short. I just kind of was born into cricket in that sense. I played cricket like everybody else in India. My brother played cricket. And I guess I was an okay cricketer. I wasn't the worst. I played till a university level, which is not the worst thing. And if you grow up in a city like Bombay with like 27 million people, of which close to 27 million people want to play for Bombay and for India. Yeah. So it is fierce competition. But I guess like more than just the playing bit, I always felt like, thanks in part to my brother that we always knew more about cricket. Like we were kind of nerdy. Like we knew, like we just did not know who the players were. We knew always like backstories about them. We knew all about the commentators. I had for such a cool looking guy, I was a pretty uncool kid. You could call me that at some level, but I think it was just almost predestined. Everybody in my family just assumed that I would be in cricket. And the story I always tell people is when I was 6 or 7, when the 1992 World Cup was there, for some strange reason, I knew all the stats. I knew what Jeff Marsh, how many 50s he had made. And this is well before the internet, right? And I was still you would think that I was this kid in the corner of a room who never left house. I was a pretty popular child, despite being a cricket nerd. So I think my entry into cricket was pretty standard in that sense, but unique in its own way.
So where did you get the source of all this data from then without the internet?
I think it was just that my brother and I watched cricket so much more intently, like everywhere else, but especially in India. Like watching cricket is such a communal activity where everybody's just sitting around together, families are sitting together, you have neighbors over, and especially back then, owning a television set was still a novelty. In the lower middle class setup where I was born into, I wasn't born into a lot of money, but we had a television set at home, which in itself was a big deal back then.
Yeah.
And I think I was probably the first generation who saw cable television as well. So a lot of cricket came in. So we were able to watch a lot of cricket in Australia and in the West Indies. And my parents were pretty liberal when it came to cricket. I could bunk school. If West Indies lost, I was allowed to not go to school because everybody made fun of me. It was like a universal thing. Everybody knew of me as this West Indies kid. They thought that something was wrong with me to the extent in 1994, India and West Indies played a test match in Wankhede, and it was the big Tendulkar versus Lara battle. And I wasn't a big Bollywood fan even back then, but this other cousin of mine made this poster for me. which a new movie had released at that point, which translated, and I bravely carried it in, not knowing what it meant. It basically said that Lara is a player, Sachin is a loser. And like, imagine this, like I'm walking into Wankhede Stadium holding this. And even though I was just 8 or 9 years old, the cops pretty much told me, look, if you take that inside, you're going to get beaten up and we might be party to it as well. So quietly just come with us. And they just stored the little poster and then they said, okay, now you can go back in. So, I don't know. So we just kind of lived through cricket. Like, our day began with cricket, our day ended with cricket.
Yeah.
And I think the whole knowledge about the stats and all of that came from just listening to the commentary or just watching, like, when stats would come up on screen.
Yeah.
And almost like I said, like I do now, I was a journalist even back then, I guess. I was just more curious to know about everyone. Like, not just like sit there and just talk about what was happening.
So, like, who from that West Indies team sort of got your attention then, if they direct you to wanted to be a supporter of them as such?
I guess like everybody else, because of the Tendulkar Lara thing, like Brian Lara was sort of my hero, like he was with Kieran and so many other kids who grew up all around the world in that era. I mean, Kieran is a few years younger than me. I wouldn't accuse him to be just a year shy of 40. So I take that back. So we're not the same era in a way, but we are. And I think, but the guy who really won me over, and I say it with such pride and privilege that he's one of my closest friends in cricket right now, is Sir Richie Richardson, with the maroon hat. Because obviously my era was just after, like, Viv Richards and Haynes and Greenwich had just retired. So it was Richie Richardson and to an extent Patrick Patterson, who obviously I ended up having a history with. But it was Richie Richardson, Patrick Patterson, Ian Bishop. Those were my guys in that West Indies team. And obviously, like, Lara just was Lara, right? So if Lara won matches for West Indies, and this is my deep connect with them, my family would buy sweets. Like, the neighbors would come to our doorstep with sweets. It was almost like I did something, which is kind of weird. Like, just to digress a little, when Carlos Brathwaite did the famous, remember the name moment at the Eden Gardens. I was there covering the T20 World Cup final at the Eden Gardens, and as soon as that match finished, literally the entire press box ran to me and like congratulated me. Like, it was just weird. It's just this weird surreal connection I've always had with West Indies cricket.
So you mentioned then, obviously, always having this interest, and you done you listened, you got the stats, and you always picked up on that sort of stuff. But where did the sort of journalism route come, and how did you go down that path?
This is where it takes a pretty drastic turn, and I'm pretty open about it these days. Like I said, and it also explains the hair and all of that. Like, so, yes, I mean, I was pretty normalish child. I mean, as close to normal as possible in my case. Growing up, I played cricket, I watched cricket, I listened to cricket. I was like, I could do voices and impressions of cricketers. I would do all these as a little child. I would entertain people. Like, New Year parties, I'd be on stage in front of hundreds of people, just impersonating cricketers or commentators and all of that. But then I did go through a phase, like in my early college years, where I was a drummer in a heavy metal band. Like, I grew my hair and I was really into my music as well. But back then in Bombay, and I blame me and nobody else for this, I also kind of lost my way. I kind of like, drugs were involved with the whole metal scene back then, like, and you just kind of peer pressure or whatever you want to call it. I got hooked onto it quite a bit. I was with a bunch of people, some of my friends, we all were onto it. And then, unfortunately, like, what started off as just we need to get high to make music and all that crap that you say in your late teens. The scales got tipped in favor of like, let's get high and the music will take care of itself. And the music just kind of faded away. And then I went through a 2-3 year phase where I was not in a very good space at all. Like, I wouldn't know whether it was morning or night. And like, I was doing all sorts of things, and also doing it. I'm not talking about high end chemical drugs, like whatever we could lay our hands on, and which is
Right.
like, now when I look at it, it's pretty dangerous. And
Yeah.
a couple of times, and I'm talking, this is like I'm 19, 20, like, completely lost control of my life, and I'd overdosed a couple of times. I almost like didn't make it, but I survived. And then when I was 22, 2007, when it happened the second time, I almost had this reality check, and I said, and while I was overdosing, I remember thinking, I just need a second innings in life. And even there, I was thinking in cricketing terms, right? Like,
Yeah.
and throughout that period, though, I should say that, and I always say that cricket kept me alive, because cricket was sobering for me. Like, I still was the cricket guy, right? I still had to like tell the world what was happening, at least my little world. So whatever was happening with me away from home with the drugs and all of that, I still watched a lot of cricket. So
Yeah.
I almost felt like I owed it to everyone around me. So when I took that call on, like, doing away with drugs or that side of me, cricket was there to save me again. And
Yeah.
someone recommended that, like, your son's a storyteller and all that. They told my parents, and my parents had no idea what was happening. They humble, like, low middle class parents. They had no
Yeah.
idea about. They never drank or smoked or even ate meat, like, because where I come from, eating meat is a sin as well, or a crime, or whatever you want to call it. But I did all of that. I was the ultimate blasphemer. So then someone said you should try your hand at journalism, and there was this journalism course in Chennai. It was a 10-month course. And at this stage in life, I really did think that I need to give myself a chance, like that second innings.
Yeah.
And I need to, like, go away from Bombay for a while. Like, I just could not be there, because it was just a matter of time before I would get sucked back in. And it worked out like brilliantly. I mean, I didn't learn a lot about journalism, but I did meet my current wife there. And I think just the 10 months I was there, I got into the habit of writing, though. I will give them that much credit.
Yeah.
And at the end of those 10 months, it was May 2008, I got a job with a pretty leading national paper in India, the Indian
Oh, right.
Express.
Wow.
And yeah, we were literally off to the races. And within 5 months of like becoming a journalist, which rarely happened in Indian cricket at that point, if you worked, or in India at that point, if you worked for a big national
Yeah.
newspaper, I was covering international cricket. And,
Wow.
yeah, and people, I remember, were completely shocked. They had this long-haired guy with like wearing like these short shorts and all these colorful paraphernalia, and like walking into the press box. They were like, who's that guy? And like, yeah, that's how it began. This is yeah, I remember my first international match I covered was India-England ODI in Bangalore in November 2008. And before long, I was on the circuit. I was doing tours. I was meeting
Wow.
wonderful people, Kieran, and it just completely turned like, so I went from overdosing and nearly dying to becoming this international cricket journalist.
Fantastic. Did you always have, when you did the course, did you always have in the back of your mind it was going to be sport or cricket journalism that you wanted to get into? Yeah.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. In fact, I remember when we had the campus interviews, I got a few job offers from a few of the other newspapers, but I picked the Indian Express because they seemed to have the clarity about what they wanted from me.
Right. Okay.
And cricket is I at that point I couldn't trust myself to write on anything else, right? Like, so
yeah,
I wanted
because your
to
knowledge.
Absolutely. And I knew so little about journalism that it's not that I dreamt of like, about touring the cricket world and covering matches. I knew nothing about that. I just knew that, oh, well, they've thrown me somewhere, journalism. Okay, fine. But I have to, again, stay loyal to cricket. I always
Yeah.
owed something to cricket. It kept me alive. So it was always going to be cricket. And like I said, these things probably are, I'm not the most religious of people, but I guess these things are out of our control. It was just like meant to be, like predestined that I ended up here.
How, once you got into the journalist side of things with cricket, how did you have a plan in your head in terms of how would you, the high volume of people who do it, how did you have a strategy in place to sort of differentiate yourself in terms of how you'd go about it?
I think two things happened. Not growing up wanting to be a journalist really helped, because I had no role models, or I didn't look up to anyone, and not because I was cocky, but I really did not know. I did read, but I never rarely paid attention to the bylines when I was growing up and I was reading cricket. So I basically just knew what I knew, which was to be myself. Like, which I mean, maybe it's not the best of things, but it was. I knew that I couldn't pretend. I couldn't be someone I wasn't, and but I did know that my strength throughout my life had always been storytelling, and even
Yeah.
today. I still say I'm a better storyteller than I'm a hardcore journalist. I've never been the newsy guy. I've done breaking news, of course, but
Yeah.
that doesn't come as naturally to me as like telling stories, like taking the reader to where I am.
Yeah.
So I just literally decided to be myself and let my strength do its bidding. And obviously, just I was lucky. I had a boss who like kind of pushed me a lot and got the
Right.
best out of
Okay.
me. So, and I had the same editor from the start, like May 2008 to December 2018, when I left the paper and when I left India and I moved to Australia. But it was always about that. Like it was always obviously putting myself out there, and I realized from a very early stage that it helped being me.
Yeah.
Like just the fact that I didn't dress like most other journalists, just the fact that I didn't look like any other journalist, and to an extent, the fact that I didn't write like many other journalists, it always like kind of helped. And
Yeah.
now when I look back, when I do a lot of TV and radio, I do everything you're asked not to do on TV. I wear clothes like these. I know this is audio, but like, I just wear a lot of color. I move my hands around. I'm moving. I'm saying all sorts of irreverential nonsense, but it helps because I'm not pretending. I'm just being myself, right?
Yeah.
So I think I kind of realized it very early on that if I can do that, at least
Be yourself.
then I'm giving it my best shot. And it
Yeah.
has worked over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of obviously, like you mentioned it there about going to Australia. When did you move to Australia?
I moved in December 2018, and the reason I moved was my wife, the one I met at journalism school. So we'd been married for a while in India. She's always been a special needs teacher and an artist.
Right.
She just felt like she was getting a little stuck in Mumbai, like, whereas I was traveling the world and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not often that she could come, but just professionally, she was feeling a little stuck. And so we took this huge gamble in 2016, early 2017, where we said, look, we don't have a lot of money, so we can't apply for the general route, which is apply for permanent residency elsewhere
Yeah.
and move. So it has to be a cricket country because otherwise I have no future. If you go to the
Yeah.
US, then I don't know what I can do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's well before the ICC decided to host a World Cup there. Yeah. So we picked Australia, and we both been to Australia. I was there on a cricket tour, and my wife came along for a few weeks. So we chose Australia. I kind of chose Adelaide for her when we were looking for universities.
Yeah.
And we took the big call of like literally mortgaging everything, every little thing we had in India, and paying for her masters. And she moved to Adelaide, and we also took a huge gamble on ourselves. Really, we lived apart for 20 months, knowing that I can't visit you, you can't visit me. We have no money to do that. And and I credit her completely for making this move work, because she went there by herself and did all the hard work, worked 3 jobs, knowing that she couldn't get any money from back home, and finished her master's and then got a job in a school. And that's when I moved. It was the easiest move ever. So because by that time I'd established myself, I had a reputation.
Yeah.
I'd written my first book on MS Dhoni, and Cricbuzz had always had approached me to come on board anyway. So I told them, look, I'm going to Australia to be with my wife. Do you want me to be the Australian correspondent and just the overall, the senior kind of guy? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. So I moved countries with a backpack and nothing else, because I had a wife, a job, a house, a car, all thanks to her, really. I mean, the job part may be me, but it's the easiest move ever. And it's been the best move. Honestly, I know when I made that move, a lot of people, senior journalists back in India were like, "Oh, mate, you will not fit in. You will be Australian media is different and all of that." And I was like, "Look, I'm not going there to fit in. I'm just going there to be with my wife, but also just be myself." Let's see. I used to tell them, give it a year. Let's see if I dress and talk like them or they dress and talk like me. Lots of colorful shirts and a lot of bare feet these days in Australian cricket press boxes, odd, I'll say.
Yeah. And so once she got involved, so you mentioned there you got involved with Cricbuzz then, which is where you're currently at now. So what was the sort of role, your first role then part of Cricbuzz?
I mean, I was officially, and I still am officially, the Australian correspondent, but my role is a lot more like Cricbuzz. They're the number one cricket website in the world, but had
Yeah.
nothing to do with me. They're just smart business minds running the website, and they'd been number one long before I came on board. 100 million plus downloads and all of that. But I think what they wanted from me was to kind of add like a bit of me to their editorial, like print editorial content, because the video content is still like number one by a distance, right? They had Harsha, and literally anyone in the broadcast sphere is doing stuff for them.
Yeah.
So I took it upon myself to do my own stuff, of course, but also kind of try and mentor a lot of the young writers there. There's a lot of talented writers in Cricbuzz, especially in India. So I kind of just helped them ideate, and again, even there it helped that because I'm not a naturally trained traditional journalist. I could just tell them what I did, and like I basically open the doors for them to just be themselves. And I think I take a lot of pride in how I've seen some of them grow and become really, really good journalists. Like, so that was my role, and it's always been my role. Like, just to ideate and create content ideas, and then help them through, help them with the writing process, kind of. And honestly, I think I've become a better writer since I started talking about writing to other writers. Like, you suddenly learn your tricks. Yeah, and I think it's been a very therapeutic experience for me to be in that sort of, I hate the word, but in that mentor role where you suddenly like you become better because you're trying to help others become better.
No, definitely.
But Jordan, can I just jump in here? I need to ask Bharat a question because I remember on a few instances, once I think we were in Mumbai as well, and like I needed some toiletries or something. We couldn't get it, and Bharat and some of his friends came, and you're like, it's a risk. Like, we're not sure. We're not supposed to take you out. But, me and Bharat and his friends, we're walking through the streets of Mumbai and people are recognizing and thinking, no, that can't be. So we managed to get away and sneak back into the hotel just in time before the crowd started building up. And then I remember another time in Trinidad, we were sitting on the boardwalk at the back of the Hyatt. And Jadeja was passing, but he's like, how do you know him? Like, how do you know him to be having... But I've known Bharat for quite a long time, and he's like family to not just to me. Like, he knows Emma very well, and obviously me and Bharat have a very good mutual friend in Marlon Samuels, who's someone that people generally don't get a chance to know. So for Bharat to have that personality, to allow someone like that to feel comfortable around him, and obviously a lot of this has been about your personality and how you let people in. And people feel comfortable around you to the point where, you even did one of MS's books. What do you think was sort of that key factor that sort of cultivated this personality you had, like throughout your growing up or throughout your experiences in dealing with people and letting people feel so comfortable around you?
No, firstly, I really appreciate all those things, Kieran. And I wouldn't say, that's the first time you're saying nice things about me. You always say nice things about me, and I say nice things about you. But yeah, you're right. I mean, look, our relationship goes back to the day you started playing Test cricket, right? Like in 2011, I was there. That was my first trip to the West Indies, and you started playing Test cricket, and we just formed a bond. And I think, and even in Australia now, I've developed such strong bonds with a lot of Australian cricketers, which is, even though at many levels we have nothing in common, I guess I just put it down to I'm very honest with who I am. Like, I don't I'm not overawed by anyone. At the same time, I don't look down on anyone. I'm not rude, or I just believe very, very strongly in people connection, and I genuinely love human beings. Like, I do. Not the best species on this planet, I have to say, but I just like people, treat people like people, and it has nothing to do with whether you're a cricketer. Like, I'll speak to you the same way I'll speak to someone I don't know, or someone I meet on the street who I might just meet that one time. And I think I genuinely just love developing those relationships with everyone. And I guess when people talk about finding a purpose in life and all of that, and I guess I'm talking philosophical here, but I did realize when I was going through that whole troubled phase of my life, and even after that, I realized that one thing I do better than anything else I do. Not the cricket writing, not the commentary, nothing, but I think I'm able to make people smile. And I thought like that is my purpose. Like, people spend their entire lives looking for that purpose. And I just felt like if I walk into a room, I'm able to make people, like you said, Kieran, and it means a lot to me for you to say that. I make people comfortable. I kind of let them just drop their guard in a good way, where they're like, oh, I can just be myself. And I've heard a few of them say this. Aaron Finch told me this recently. He said like, oh, that's how we talk about you in the dressing room when he was still playing. Like, we can just be ourselves with him. We can trust him. And I think that means a lot to me. It doesn't mean that I don't do my job right. Like, if I have to be a journalist when it matters, I will be a journalist. But it's more that. And like, I just don't treat people with I don't put anyone on a pedestal, which obviously kind of it's completely in contrast to our society, our culture in India, where you're from a young age, you're like kind of trained to put everyone on a pedestal. Like, it's not just celebrities or gods and all that, but people within your household, your neighbors, like everyone's like always constantly putting each other on a pedestal. Like, so I think I found it a bit jarring even growing up, like when my parents would just force me to touch other people's feet, or just to say, oh, you have to follow in their footsteps, so you have to look up to them. So I think I kind of shied away from it. And then I think it just became like my personality. But again, like it's what you see is what you get. Like, in more ways than one with me. Like, it's I just don't know how to not be myself. And I'm sure there are some people who get annoyed by it, but I mean, I even them I love. Like, so I generally do believe a lot in love. Like, and I honestly do. And my wife doesn't appreciate the fact that I walk around telling everyone that I love them. But, well, she has often asked me, well, what's the difference between them and me? And I'm often, that's the only time I'm tongue-tied, the only time I'm lost for words. But I think it's just the basis of it is honestly just love. Honestly, spreading love is what I believe in strongly.
And another question I had for you, obviously know that you've been converted into an Australian. What would you say are the differences and similarities that you've noticed in the Australian cricket system as opposed to the Indian cricket system? And what allows Australia to breed, I guess, that level of success where they not only compete, but they win so many tournaments, as opposed to India, who has, I guess, resources that other countries would die for, but aren't able to translate that into, I guess, the amount of international trophies as they'd like to.
With India first, Kieran, it's that fear of failure. I mean, you can talk about how mighty the BCCI is, how strong Indian cricket is, but when you really break it down, when you really look at the society, and I mean, I find it quite, there's a lot of lazy narratives that get thrown up about India. They have so much money. Indian cricket has so much money. They run the sport. Why can't they win titles? But, titles are won on the field, as you know better than anyone else. Like, in the big moment, you can see that India freeze often. And I think it goes back to that fear of failure, and I guess it also comes from belonging to a country of 1.4 billion people, where often, like, whoever you are, failure is not an option, right? Like, it's failure. It's a country with no social welfare. And this has been my theory for a long time. And obviously, it's not that India have not won anything, but maybe there is some parallels you can draw with who was captain of India when they were winning. It was MS Dhoni, who somehow was, despite having grown up in India as well, in a lower middle class family, I think was able to kind of somehow just get over that fear of failure and treat a cricket match for what it is, a cricket match. And that's where I think Australians are different to any other country in the world, because they deal one, and this I learned like by not just watching cricket, but other Australian sports like the AFL and everything else. I think sports, like I said, cricket is part of my DNA, but sports is just so part of their DNA. I mean, in India, you can kind of break down the age group of people or the gender, about how cricket is followed. In Australia, I mean, whether you're an 85-year-old woman, like, or with a walker, or you are like a child who's 4 years old, they understand sports so much differently. It's about winning and it's about losing. It's about that whole, all the Australian cliches that you hear. But they're not cliches. They actually believe in that. Like, they treat sport as as an entity, which, like, when it's happening, it's all about winning, right? Like, you have to win, mate. Like, yeah, that's what it's all about, mate. And then they're able to then just divorce themselves from that failure or whatever. And if they don't win, they don't win, right? Like, there's no, and you can see it in their body language. You can see it in the body language of an Indian team when they don't win, or the heavy shoulders that seem to be there. And the best example is the last 50 over World Cup final, right? Like, they dominated the entire tournament, but then on the big day, when this whole expectation was around like them winning and the prime minister giving them the trophy, the Air Force pilots flying over, all that was planned, they froze, right? Australia outplayed them, yes, but they completely froze, starting from the pitch and all of that. And I think that's the big, at least in my opinion, the big differentiating factor with the fear of failure with India and with Australians, just how they are built towards sport. Like, they're just so sporty, right? Like, they're either playing sport or watching sport or running. And like, I'll be like walking the dogs in the Adelaide Hills where I live now, huffing and puffing. And there'll be like this 80-year-old woman who just runs past me. I'm like, why? Like, why are you embarrassing me? But it's just a very physical country. And I think they understand sport very differently to everyone else. And that's where I would also say that when you look at the business side of things, though, why the IPL is the IPL and the BBL is the BBL. Because I think, I know that wasn't your question, but just but that's the flip side. Like, Cricket Australia have struggled to like make BBL the product, right? Every year they tried different kinds of gimmicks. Yeah. Because I think at some level they thought we can just ride on the success of the IPL or try to make it the Australian version of the IPL. It doesn't work. Like, where in India, cricket it's a sport, but it's also a big escape, right? Yeah. When you go to watch a cricket match, you escape the pressures and stresses of life. And it is stressful to live in India, trust me. I've lived there for 30 years. But in Australia, like, you go to a sporting field to watch sport, that's it. Like, I've sat and watched games from the stands. They're not there for the gimmickry. Like, they're not there to listen to the DJ and dance when he says dance or lift your hand and all of that. They're actually watching the real sport. So I think there is it's cultural at the end of the day.
So with that, then, who would be, I guess, your pick to win this T20 World Cup now?
Great point. I think it's such a, my answer to any question about World Cup, even when someone asks me who's going to win the 2023 50-over World Cup, I always start with West Indies, but then I'm like, okay, fine, they're not there. But then we'll talk about the other teams. So I do believe, and I would like your opinion on this as well. I was telling someone the other day, like T20 World Cups in particular, especially on pitches which are not predictable. Like, I'm not saying they're good or bad, but they're unpredictable. It does open the door to many possibilities, right? But still, if there's one team you look at always in any T20 World Cup and you're like, they have like more players who can just single-handedly win matches on the day than anyone else. And it's always West Indies. So purely in terms of whether they do it or not, you look at that team, you're like, they are favorites, right? Like, I've never believed, and I've told Darren Sammy this millions of times. I mean, it worked for him in 2016 when he kept calling that team David and everybody else Goliath. But that doesn't make sense. They're always favorites at the start of the World Cup. How they go is like, then it's how they go. But it's unfortunate for me as a West Indies fan that they're in that really tricky group with New Zealand and Afghanistan. It's a group of death there. But yeah, it's a long-winded answer for who's going to win the World Cup. I still think I have a feeling West Indies will come through. Like, just something about them this time, I feel like it's clicking. And Powell seems to be that kind of guy who can soak in a lot of that, what happens around West Indies cricket. Hopefully he is. And I think they're going to go, if not them, I mean, and they're everybody's favorites at the start of every World Cup, but I won't be surprised if South Africa finally win. Like, they just, I like the West Indies. For the first time, South Africa seemed to have a team where they too have so many players up and down the order who can just on the day win it for them. Like, and they have the best T20 batter in the world right now. Even a lot of Indian fans will say it's Surya Kumar Yadav, but it is Heinrich Klaasen. So I'm going to say West Indies, South Africa final. There you go.
Wow.
Interesting.
Definitely.
I know Jordan is a staunch Englishman. It's not too happy to hear that.
Well, like in less than 3 hours, I'll be at the Kensington Oval for England, Scotland. Let's see if they get past Scotland first.
Well, that banana skin anyway. No, it's interesting you said that about South Africa, because me and Kai have discussed it quite a bit, really, in terms of obviously like, can they finally, go past that sort of thing? But like you said, they have got the strength in depth this time. We've discussed as well the sort of wickets. That's obviously going to come into it a little bit, really. Have they got the sort of the varied bowling attack maybe to sort of restrict sides as well?
I think it's their bowling. I know everybody talks up their batting, as they should, but it's the bowling that really, on any kind of pitch, they have like the perfect variety that you need to win matches, right? Like, I mean, they have Shamsi and Maharaj with the ball, and even someone like Markram is so useful in T20 cricket, especially if it's slow. And then you have Nokia and Rabada, and they always find someone new at every World Cup, right? Like Lungi Ngidi is not there. I thought he would have added it more. They have Marco Jansen, and so if you have like a batting lineup which is where they're better than West Indies on paper, right? Like you look at the West Indies bowling. They need some runs to defend, like, which is similar with England as well. I mean, yes, you have Jofra Archer and Mark Wood, but you're still dependent on your batting team kind of giving you the best chance to win. But with South Africa, they can win purely with the bat, but they can also win purely with the ball. Like, even if their batters, like, have a bad day and they make just 130, you won't rule out South Africa till they're rolled out. Like, so I think that's where they're better than on paper. I mean, you can put Australia up there as well, and they are looking for the treble, and they look so relaxed. And there's something so special about Mitchell Marsh being captain, and I have to tell you this little story about yesterday. Like, so I love. I mean, I'm close quite a bit, but Mitch is just like he's such the coolest, sweetest guy ever. So he walked up to me, and we were just like greeting each other. We hadn't seen each other since the home summer. And we're going back and forth, and I asked him, and then I don't know, I just like most conversations do, they turn to my hair, and I said, yeah, my hair's all right, but the humidity is like, I'm not too happy with it. He's like, nah, mate, I think it still looks brilliant. And I said, oh, thank you. I wanted you to say that. He's like, that's leadership for you, mate. So I think but that just sums up Mitchell Marsh, right? He's like, I can relate with it. Like, he's one of those, he walks into a room, he wants to make everyone smile, even if it is at his expense. But they look super relaxed, and like Kieran said, they know how to win this group in particular. And someone like David Warner, Kieran's good friend, he wants to finish his career on a high. And what better way than have the treble, right? All 3 world titles, but be the first men's team to do that as well.
I think you mentioned there about Mitchell Marsh. I think one thing that I've just finished watching the Amazon series with the test, obviously with England, and I think that it sort of showed him coming into the Headingley test, Mitchell Marsh, and making that superb century. And he talked about like he never thought he'd play Test cricket again, and it seemed to have like given that emphasis of like, what will be will be. I'm just going to be me, and I'll take everything that comes, I'll just we'll tackle it and we'll do what we do. And I think that'll have a real positive impact on that side. And like you mentioned there before about sort of India's sort of situations in terms of like battle that they have, and everything is just sort of the pressures that come with it. I think you mentioned there about South Africa, you mentioned there about the West Indies, and then Australia. Like, they seem to have that sort of like, I think South Africa maybe have the no pressure aspect, because probably people aren't expecting them to get to the semi-finals. And then obviously West Indies are like, they've got that sort of strength in, the no fear sort of mentality. I think it's going to be especially this World Cup, it's going to be seeing who can get that momentum at the right time, and also go out there and just play.
Yeah, and not think too much about it, which is why I fear for England. And honestly, not because you're here, but because they have this fear that they will talk up the pitches, especially if they lose at some point in this first round, even if they lose only to Australia.
You were saying about England.
So I think my biggest fear with England is if you look at that squad, it's a really strong squad. Like, there might be a couple of question marks about the bowling, purely because of inexperience more than anything else. But Moeen Ali, Adil Rashid, Mark Wood, Jofra Archer, that's a proper gun bowling attack.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And like South Africa, they have the genuine pace, but they also have a lot of experience with their spinners. So they're almost sort of on par, but South Africa just slightly better, in my opinion. They have just more variety. But with England, and you see this like when they play Test cricket away from home, or just generally, they can kind of build narratives in their head about the pitches and the conditions and all of that. And if they fall prey to that early, and if they lose, even like say they beat Scotland and Oman and Namibia comfortably, but they go down to Australia for some reason, even though that has no relevance in this format of this World Cup going forward, but it can play a huge role in them not being the best versions of themselves. And we've seen that in the past. I mean, look at what happened in the 50-over World Cup. They just start making these bizarre decisions that doesn't make sense, and they hit the panic button more easily or more quickly than most other big high profile teams in world cricket in big events. So they are defending champions. So when I should mention them as being one of the favorites, but the only reason I don't is I have this sneaky feeling that might happen, because like today's game, or whenever this goes out, I'm just about to go and watch England Scotland. I saw the pitch the other day. I went and watched Namibia Oman, and if it's the same pitch and I'm hearing it's the same pitch, you never know. I mean, Scotland have those tricky spinners now, Watt and Leask and all of that. They could be a handful against England. And that's the thing with England, even if they win, but if they feel that, these things could go wrong or these things can go against us, it can derail them much quicker than most other teams.
I was literally about to say that. I think that you mentioned there about the game against Scotland and Oman. They could even win and it'd be a scratchy performance, and there will be question marks. And like you said, and I think Matthew Mott's got a real job to do here, because I think that, he's got to really sort of push this, get the best out of this side, whatever the conditions may be as well. I think it's really important. So you're saying that your 4 semi-finalists will be West Indies, Australia, South Africa, and India?
No. I would think so. But you also have to make. It's such a complicated format. You have to look at the format and even see if that's possible. A lot of experts have gone these are my 4 semi-finalists, and then others have said no, but that's not even possible for all 3 of them to qualify from there.
True. Yeah.
Which is why I went ahead and just predicted the final instead. I said, okay, West Indies and South Africa playing the final. But I mean, the other teams, and then look, there's always New Zealand, right? You talk about South Africa, and when is this high time that they won a World Cup? Every time you say that about them, you have to say the same thing about New Zealand. And, they are in that tricky group as well against Afghanistan and West Indies, which is why I think the big focus will be on the India-Pakistan match. But for me, the 2 biggest matches of this first round are going to be New Zealand, West Indies, and West Indies, Afghanistan, and New Zealand, Afghanistan, because that is the fun group, right? And look what Afghanistan did last night compared to what the West Indies did against the PNG.
Yeah, exactly.
Afghanistan are just they're coming off a strong 50-over World Cup as well, where West Indies won there. So it could well be the year of Afghanistan at least making the semi-finals. I said this actually in 2021. I thought they started strong, and maybe they could, because they no longer are, they don't upset teams. They beat teams.
No.
No longer, you could even put Sri Lanka and to an extent Bangladesh in T20 World Cups below Afghanistan. If Bangladesh tomorrow beat Australia or India, it still could be called an upset, but not if Afghanistan do that. That's just how good Afghanistan have become. And they are my dark horses, the new dark horses. Forget New Zealand and South Africa. The new dark horses are Afghanistan.
Well, I think Afghanistan were just a Glenn Maxwell innings away in the 50-over World Cup as well, weren't they, from the semi-finals? So, I mean, they are being pretty consistent and playing good cricket across pretty much all formats now, so you can't rule them out.
No, not at all. And Glenn Maxwell innings, and I still can't believe I was there at the Wankhede, sitting right behind where Mujibur Rahman was, where he drops the easiest of catches, right? Australia would have lost by such a huge margin, and you're right, Afghanistan would have gone through, but it was one of those crazy nights when Maxwell went crazy with the dropped catch, and things just went till that point their campaign was so strong, and I think they finished strongly as well. So you're right, Kieran. I think I'm I'm with Afghanistan. West Indies could not have picked a more difficult group to be in, because New Zealand are that team, right? They just find a way. They make semi-finals. They don't always march their way into semi-finals. They'll just find a way. Just find a way. Yeah, so it's going to be tricky.
So what do you think of, obviously, the incorporation of the US in terms of hosting the World Cup, and what are the benefits that we can sort of try to extract as a global cricketing fraternity? Because I don't think that necessarily we went about marketing it to the US public in the best way possible. Obviously, I think we just marketed to the Caribbean diaspora, the Indian, Asian diaspora, and whatever, I guess, South Africans and Australian diaspora there may be there, as opposed to probably getting the likes of people that organize the Super Bowl and really getting big interest from the American market so that we can properly tap into it.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like, who are they marketing to? I mean, the talk is like we want to make USA the next big market. It's there, and we want to really tap into it. But there are two ways of going about it, right? A, there's an already established fan following there. I mean, all the expats, and I saw some ridiculously fascinating stats recently when you talk about the South Asian population in the US. Like apparently, according to the current census of the US, in 22 out of 50 states, when you look at foreign-born residents, you leave the Mexicans aside, obviously. There are more Mexicans. There were 10 million Mexicans. But the country leading the way is India. In 22 out of 50 states, like most foreign-born residents who are not Mexican are Indian. So it's there. I mean, it's a ready-made market. You don't have to go looking for them. I mean, even for us, like, in the media, like the majority of cricket content we create or a lot of it gets consumed by the expats in the US, by the Indians and the Pakistanis, the people from the Caribbean diaspora. So are the ICC just going after people who are already there? Or are they, like, to use my analogy, targeting like this guy in central Alabama who's never heard of cricket, like, who's in that southern belt? Like, are they targeting someone in Cody, Wyoming, like, a cowboy in Cody, Wyoming? Is he going to, like, get off his horse and pick up a cricket bat? Like, are they doing that? I can't see them doing that because for now it looks like they just have this like big El Dorado market. And the comparison I make is like, yes, there are 1.4 billion people in India, like in actual India, but compared that spending capacity, maybe 20% of them have the money to even spend on cricket. But you talk about the 5 million Indian expats who live in the US, you would say close to 80% will be able to do that, right? Like, so there's more value in that sense in targeting these people who are dying to watch cricket. And for me, whatever happens in the 16 matches, few of which have already happened in the US in this league or in this World Cup, more significantly, what happens in July is what matters more, because the Major League Cricket is becoming bigger. As we found out last week, they'll be official now, like the stats will be official. Just look at the signings, right? Ricky Ponting, coach, Steve Smith, Maxwell, head, all playing for the same side. Yesterday, it's announced that Patrick Cummins will be replacing Aaron Finch as captain of the other franchise. So you're beginning to target all these big names. I think they're going from 6 to 8 franchises. They're going to play home and away. And IPL money is in there, and like, a lot of Indian industrialists have put their money in there. There'll be other. It's again, even if you're a business person who wants to invest money, it's one thing being asked to invest money in the US, which it's a capitalist market which will make money for you, rather than take them to ask them to invest in, say, a league in Zimbabwe, for example, just for comparison's sake. So I think the league stuff will make the US a bigger market than whatever happens in this World Cup or whatever the US team do. Because till the time you get, you show me that the cowboy in Cody, Wyoming is jumping off his horse and saying, like, give me that bat, or however they speak, I don't think cricket really can consider itself to be an American sport, if that makes sense.
That's where I think there've been those missed opportunities.
Yeah.
From a marketing perspective, like, the Rockefeller Center, for instance, was lit up yesterday, I think, or the day before, but there could have been so much more opportunity to sort of maximize loads of different bits, look at base, using them as opening pitch in a baseball game and like really sort of maximizing the opportunity. And I just hope that some of the stuff they're doing now is not too late.
Yeah, I mean, you can just, and look, there will be automatic interest on what happens on the 9th, right? Like, even I'm like the only Australia game I miss is Australia-England, because I go to New York for a few days to build up that game and hype it up if it needs any more hyping up. So and I think that just for those 3 hours, there will be people who are not cricket people in America who'll just be curious about like, hey, what's happening there? Like, what's all the melee in that corner? Like, and it's not even in New York, right? It's in Long Island, Nassau. So it's not the most easiest to, I haven't been there yet, but it's not the easiest to get to either. It's not the most easily accessible place. So, but I think there will be a brief break, a respite for everyone else from everything else that happens in America. And then maybe they'll pay attention. But can you hold that attention? Like you said, like, I think, John, that's the big question. And and are they even interested in doing that? Like, well, going back to my analogy, are they going into like the deep south? Are they going into the northwest? And like, are they going to the wild, wild west and like saying, hey, look, this is new product we're selling to you, which is not baseball, which is different, which is cricket. At the moment, at least, I can't see them doing that.
No.
It looks like they're going for the people who are already there, like the fans are already there. So we'll see. But who knows? Maybe Major League Cricket could be, and which is why, and I don't have a problem with that either. I mean, a lot of people historically have felt that unless you have a strong international team, you can't say that the sport has really broken into that country. Like it's cricket's a business now, right? Like it's as much a business as the NFL is or the AFL is or the English Premier League is. So if, say, cricket can bring in bigger audiences in a league form, like the MLC grows so much that maybe that cowboy does suddenly start supporting like a team based around his region or her region. What's wrong with that? Like, I think it is still a form of globalizing the sport in a different format. But you don't need the USA winning a World Cup, for example, for it to be called an American sport, in my opinion, anyway.
No.
I think that as you rightfully said as well, it's interesting to me because the market is already there in terms of what we already know of. As you said, 20 out of 50 states, there's already so many Indians there. There's so many Caribbean people there. So you don't need to market to them. We've already captured them. They will watch cricket regardless of if you market to them or not because they want something coming in. So it's just capturing a new market. And that's what I said. I think that in terms of the start of the MLC and stuff, they need to be going into schools and these things and trying to get like cricket programs and, building local cricketers, because that's when American cricket will sort of really take off, when you don't have to rely on expatriates to come and be a member of the cricket playing society, when you can create local Americans. And that's when your cricket strength and your cricket depth, because they're having some of the best coaches in the world, as you said, going across and coaching in these leagues. So if it's a situation where they can have, I guess, academy set up and coaches spending time out there, so you're getting high-level coaching from a young age, then American cricket will have some sort of viability, and then investors will see some viability in the sport as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, you're just giving kids there an alternative, right? Like you're like, okay, look, you have all these sporting options, and America is sort of blessed in that way. But yeah, I mean, give them like, add cricket wherever you think, and don't just keep going into the South Asian market and saying, hey, like, Dallas, like, there are a lot of Indians there. Let's go there and say, because those kids already know about cricket. Like, they even if they're born in there, they've heard about it from their parents. But like really go into places where cricket doesn't exist, like Kieran said, like introduce it as an option, right? Like, make it like, make it this like cool, unique, sexy option. Like, we won't use those words with cricket, unfortunately, unless if you're talking about Kieran Powell, the man, but like, cool and sexy, but like, you still like, you could just give them this cool alternative and see like, how it, at least give it a chance, like, maybe it'll fail. At least try to tap into that market.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you look at well, what we know as football, but what they call soccer. And 15 years ago, it wasn't a thing in America. And look at MLS now. Look at some of the names that have played in MLS. Look at some of the people that own teams. I mean, you've got Lionel Messi out in the US now. That's what they've managed to generate over that time frame. So you think about a young kid now, 5 years old, and you're showing him a World Cup. You've got the Olympics coming in 28. So that's cricket is being involved in that Olympic as well. So by the time he gets to 20, he's had a 15-year journey. That same 15-year journey, MLC will be a major player in the T20 franchise space as well. So, it's just for them to tap the market in the right way, as opposed to, I guess, going after what we already have.
Yeah, absolutely right. Like, I mean, there's no point like preaching to the choir anymore, right? Like, I mean, they're there, they're already there. Like, so you have to like go. You're right, and I think, and you really. make such great points. The Olympics are coming up. MLC could be a big thing. And you could really make the most of it. And yeah, I mean, just take Ricky Ponting to the schools or whoever else, like, Pat Cummins. These are such great ambassadors for the sport. And yeah, and look, whether we like it or not, like, I know there are a lot of detractors still of T20 franchise cricket. It's only going to get bigger, right? The contracts, it's just a matter of time, maybe 2 years, 5 years, who knows, where the central contracts are going to come from the franchise and not the national bodies, at least for most national bodies. So when that is the future, like, try and grow the sport. And yeah, if you can get America in that sense, you won. Like, even if USA is not going to play in the Ashes in 5 years' time, who cares whether they play Test cricket or not? That's not the point here. Like, rather than just going, like you said, just throwing these banners in a place where you don't need to throw banners. So they're like, oh wait, hang on, cricket, we know cricket, we'll come. Just tell us where to come. Rather than kind of actually introduce cricket to America, rather than just use the word introduction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
What I would have loved to seen be done, especially obviously with the India-Pakistan match being held in Long Island, not New York, is obviously not just media, but you think about it, you have the likes of, let's say, Babar Azam or Virat Kohli going on to these famous late night talk shows like Kimmel and Fannel and those kind of things. That would be massive for the sport, because then those are shows that are watched religiously throughout the country. You get interest around it. You get some big American celebrities from in and around the area to hype it up, because we've got one chance at a first impression. And, as you said, contracts can potentially be coming from these boards. And if you have an America and you see what they do in terms of their sports and the level of money, the level of revenue that they generate, what that can bring to a cricketing landscape, you can easily see a franchise contract going in 10 years' time from what everyone thought was an eye-popping 2.9 million for Mitchell Starc to a 29 million, So, why not try and explore as much as possible as you can whilst you're there?
Totally. And all I'll say to that is, would you want to see Virat Kohli or Babar Azam on Jimmy Kimmel, or do you want to see someone who really can bring cricket to the masses, which is me, on Jimmy Kimmel? And I think that's. I think you're looking. Then people will you need 100%. Someone to turn heads.
There you
Absolutely,
go.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. And it's been really insightful and stuff. And your energy it brings, great. And thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. And like I said, when Kieran said, it took me less than, I think, 3 seconds to say yes. He just said, I need you on the podcast. Yes. Yeah. I don't know what you're going to ask me. It's your podcast. He's a brother, and he'll always be a brother. We go back a long way. And it was great meeting you as well, Jordan. And
thank you so much
for having me. And just letting me ramble on, which is what I do best.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Cheers. Speak to you soon.
Yes. Bye.